Hey there nation, welcome to the show. We help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander CheapSkate, and now we're back with another edition of the Underhive Wars. This is our series of Necromunda battle reports. This is in our Peachtree Turf War cycle. This is cycle number 2, and this is battle report number 4 of that cycle. This one is fought between my two friends, Warlord Ace with 911 of House Van Saar versus my other buddy, Sergeant Sigmarine of the Sleeping Dogs of House Delaque. So last time these two gangs fought it out in the very first cycle of our campaign, they both won their very first battle reports, and so now these two victors and champions are going to be fighting each other now for round number 2. And this time we're fighting in a looter scenario with this one, so because of that, ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Sigmarine will be the defender and my buddy Warlord Ace will be the attacker on this one. So that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to play some background music real fast and show you exactly what the gangs look like as well as our rosters. If you want to see exactly what each gang is taking for this one, feel free to pause and check it out at your own leisure. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, let's get this on. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, so with the rosters all done with and the gangs all tallied up, let's go and talk about exactly what the scenario rules for this one is. The scenario that is being played is called the looter scenario. What ends up happening is that the attacker is trying to steal the defender's loot counters in this one. The defender has 4 loot counters that he's able to put anywhere on top of the table surface as well as the members of his gang, and it's up to the attacker to try to attack as well as steal those loot counters. The attacker gets to use his whole gang for the crew on this scenario, so because of that, 911 will be using every single member of the gang that they can use. At the same time, however, the defender, he only gets D3 plus 4 members for his crew, but at the end of each round he can reinforce his gang by having another fighter deploy anywhere on the tabletop, and that's pretty much how it runs for them as well. In addition, the defender also gets home turf advantage special rules, which means that they gain bonuses for any of the leadership tests they would have to take during the course of the scenario as well. In the end, the attacker will earn D3 times 10 creds for each loot counter he manages to steal, and that's kind of in addition to any reputation as well as experience points bonuses as well. Usual experience points apply for this battle report. The attacker, everyone gets +1 experience points for participating. You also get an additional experience point if you manage to put anybody out of action as well, and the leader also gains, the attacker anyways, gets an additional experience points if at least 2 loot counters are stolen in this scenario as well. Now, aside from experience points, you also get bonuses to reputation as well. The attacker gains 1 reputation for each loot counter that is stolen, while the defender loses 1 for each loot counter that is stolen, obviously. And of course, if any gang bottles out in this scenario, they lose 1 reputation point as well. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to show you exactly where all the loot counters are going to be kept on this battle report. And as you can see in this photo, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine decided to place all 4 of his loot counters on the top of the MCI Chemical Works tower that's on his side of the deployment area as well. So you can see we have a little 4 counters right there. My buddy Warlord Ace is going to have to try to climb up those towers, steal those loot counters, and also bring them across the table edge in order to win. Alright, so the scenario rules over with, you go directly to deployment for 9/11. As you can see, my buddy Warlord Ace deploys his entire gang here on the right hand side of the table, right on the right hand flank of that MCI Chemical Works tower. As you can see on the right hand side, he's got his 2 Jews also with tough shakes to act as a kind of like a screening force. On the left hand side, he also has 2 members of his gangs. I believe that's Tugs and Souljax, who's also there with Moloko, I believe is the name of the guy, who's also a champion armed with the last gun. And then take up the back right there is his leader Bussanine, as well as Chopper, who's his champion, who's armed with a heavy stubber. And that makes the deployment for my buddy Warlord Ace on this one. Meanwhile, my friend Sergeant Sigmarine deploys his entire gang on the top of the MCI Chemical Works tower, defending all 4 crates. It's kind of a strong position to defend from, so that way all of his gang members are located in the same spot. All of his loot counters are also engaged in the same spot as well. He's got a good high advantage area looking over the entire battlefield, so that doesn't worry about taking his stuff being taken. As you can see on the left hand side, he's got, I believe that's Mr. Smug. That's the ganger who's armed with the bolt gun. Right next to him he has Silk, she's armed with the last gun. Then Tiny, who's armed with the grenade launcher. Wesley, who's armed with the last gun. On the right hand side he has Mr. Sinister, his gang leader, and on the top he's got Painless Joe, who's armed with his heavy stubber. And that pretty much makes the deployment on for my buddy Warlord Ace. Alright, so that takes us directly to the top of turn number 1 for the action phase for 9/11. Because the attackers get the initiative on this one, my buddy Warlord Ace starts moving out his troops. So the very first thing he does is he activates his heavy using the Overseer command ability that he has for his general. His general basically counts as double action for him to use it, but if he does use it, he can give the character that he gives it to within 12 inches double actions. And so as you can see in this phase, he decides to sprint the guy up the top of that walkway there in the center of the table, and also puts Chopper in a good position for him to open fire with his heavy stubber as well, which could be absolutely devastating because now he's in perfect range to lay down some suppressive fire on the top of that MCI Chemical Works tower. In the end, Chopper does manage to hit as well as to wound Mr. Sinister, so now he's down for the count as well. When they roll up from the injury table for him to see what happens to him, he's just down and out of action right now because he's just been wounded really bad. So he's got a serious injury. He's just laying on the ground with bleeding out at this point. And because of that, that pretty much rounds up the action for Chopper as well as for my buddy Warlord Ace's leader. Which of course leads up to my buddy Sergeant Sigmarin. He activates Tiny, who's his champion armor, the grenade launcher, who also activates Wesley, who's also his ganger armor, the last gun as well. As you can see, he moves him up a couple inches over to the left-hand side of MCI Chemical Work Tower, so that way they can start putting some suppressive fire down onto 9/11 as they cross the battlefield heading towards them. And the very first thing that my buddy Sergeant Sigmarin does is take aim with Wesley with his last gun and manages to take aim and shoot at the very closest target that is towards his gang, because according to the rules you have to shoot at the nearest target. That happens to be Tough Shakes, who's that gang right there on the ground armed with a chainsaw as well as a bolt gun. Wesley does manage to hit him, but unfortunately is unable to wound him, so because of that he's just counted as being pinned right now, and that's the reason why Tough Shake is looking up. But because he managed to hit him and also pin him, that means he's no longer the nearest target within sight, because when he's laying down he's completely covered by that piece of concrete that's protecting him. So because of that allows my buddy to take his champion Tiny armor with grenade launcher and able to take aim at Chopper, who's the champion for 9/11. Tiny takes aim with his grenade launcher and arms it up with a crack grenade so that way it can cause multiple wounds for the damage. Not only does he manage to hit Chopper as well as to wound him, but he also manages to put him out of action as well. So first blood goes directly to the sleeping dogs in that part, and my buddy Warlord Ace has now lost one of his champions for his gang, and that's an absolutely devastating loss to take on the very opening turn of this scenario. From there, we jump back over to the side of 9/11 again. My buddy Warlord Ace decides to activate Moloko, Nero, who's his champion's armor, the last gun. He activates him as well as, I believe that's Tugs is the name of the guy, who's also a ganger armor, the bolt gun. As you can see, they sprint those guys over to, they do a double move real quick over to the left-hand side next to that pile of rubble that's right next to in front of the Alexander's department store and also the gantry walkway. They also puts them in a good line position for them to start taking some open fire and take some pot shots on the top of the MCI Chemical Works Tower as well. Both of those guys take aim and open fire onto Wesley as well. Unfortunately for my buddy Warlord Ace, the only thing they managed to do was to cause 2 flesh wounds onto Wesley. So now Wesley is now down 2 points in toughness, so he will be very easy to wound. However, that guy is still activated. He can still shoot with his long-range glass gun, so he's still very much a threat at this point. And with that action phase in with those guys, we go directly to my buddy Sergeant Sigmarin. And of course, the next person he activates is his next gang champion. That guy is Tiny. That guy is armed with the heavy stubber. He also activates up with Miss Spectre as well, their last gun, and those guys start taking aim at the 9/11 guys who are right across the gantry walkway from them and start preparing to open fire with those guys. And because Tugs is his name, since Tugs is the closest target to them, both the heavy as well as Miss Spectre open up on manage to wound. And not only do they manage to wound this poor guy, they also manage to put 2 flesh wounds on him and also give a serious injury to the guy. So the guy is now laying face down, bleeding out right in front of Nero. The only reason why Nero stands his ground is because my buddy Warlord Ace managed to pass his cool check for that guy, so he kind of stands his ground at this point as well. So things are not looking very good for my buddy Warlord Ace at this point. In response, Warlord Ace then taps up one of his Jews as well, has that guy run over to that rubble pile, which is at the base of the MCI Chemical Works Tower. He kind of does it for 2 reasons, I believe. The reason why he tries to do this, first of all, is using his Jew to act as a bullet magnet to attract the shots from hitting the rest of his gang members and concentrate on that guy, because now he's the closest target. And second reason why, too, is at the same time, he's also trying to close the distance between his deployment area to where the loot counters are, because at the end of the next turn, if he doesn't manage to do something quick, one member of the sleeping dogs will show up anywhere on the tabletop, and that could prove very devastating for my buddy Warlord Ace at this point, especially considering the losses he's taking in these opening rounds. In response, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarin then activates Mr. Smug. He makes him move up his normal movement allowance to get the top of the MCI Chemical Work Tower, so that way he gets a good line of sight at that poor Juve. He takes aim with his bolt gun and cuts loose with it. And not only does he hit and wound the poor Juve, he also manages to put the poor guy out of action as well. So he gets a little sky icon right next to that guy. So because of that, that Juve will go out of action, and he will need to roll up on the serious injury table to see exactly what happens to him at this point. So for those of you who've been keeping count, my buddy Warlord Ace have now lost 2 members of his gang and another guy who's bleeding out on the ground as well. So things are definitely not looking very good for 9/11. And in fact, if my opponent's not very careful, he will have to take a bottle test at the end of the action phase. Meanwhile, the rest of the action phase is pretty simple. As you can see in this photo, he moves with the rest of those members of his gang who are not activated. Souljax hits that pile of rubble that Juve used to be at a moment ago before he got blasted off the table by Mr. Smug. At the same time, he also moves up another one of his Juves to the base of the MCI Chemical Work Tower with that walkway there, and he also sends up Tough Shakes, who managed to get back on his feet, and he also does a double movement to the right to that chemical tank there on the right-hand side as well. The rest of my buddy, Sergeant Sigmarine, he has no more gang members to activate at this point, so with the action phase over, we go directly to the end phase. And unfortunately for Warlord Ace, because he's sustained so many casualties so far, he has to take a bottle test. As you can see in this photo, he failed his bottle test, which means now for the rest of the action phases, every single time he wants to activate a fighter, they will need to take a cool check. If they fail the cool check, they fly off the battlefield running away. Now, because my friend also failed his bottle test, that means he also automatically loses 1 point reputation for the end of the scenario, because basically his gang just kind of chickened out at that point. And unfortunately for my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine, when he rolled to see if his gang bottles out, unfortunately he did fail his bottle test. I think he rolled a perfect 6 on this part, so that's the reason why it kind of worked out against him in his favor. Even with the home field advantage, unfortunately the Sleeping Dogs also decided to chicken out as well. So just like my buddy Warlord Ace, the members of the Sleeping Dogs will need to take a cool check for each of the gang members to see if they run away as well. And because of that, he will also take the -1 reputation penalty for chickening out from this battlefield. Alright, so we start with the action phase from 9/11, who my buddy Warlord Ace managed to steal the initiative for turn number 2, and the very first person he goes first, he decides to do is activate his gang champion, Nero, who's the guy who has the ability to shoot twice, I believe is what he ends up happening with his shooting abilities. So he takes aim with his last gun directly at Wesley, who's on the top of the MCI Chemical Works, and he takes aim and fires. And because the poor guy is also taking 2 flesh wounds as well so far, he has no problem whatsoever causing that guy to take off his last wound. Drops the guy as well. The guy is seriously injured. He's laying face down on the ground right now, bleeding out as well for the rest of the gang. Luckily for my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine, the rest of his gang members managed to pass their cool checks, even though they just watched their friend get shot from a long distance. And the reason why is because they also have home field advantage. And plus they're next to the loot crates, which is also really helpful for them as well. And that makes it the action phase for that fighter. In response, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine activates Tiny again, as well as Miss Spectre, and he takes aim with his grenade launcher at the nearest gang member, which is, I believe his name is Souljax. Unfortunately for my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine, though, he did manage to get a perfect 6 on for his hit, but that also means he also has to take an ammo check. As you can see, the little jam icon right next to him, he failed his ammo check, so because that Tiny will not be able to use his grenade launcher anymore either. However, he did fire a crack grenade shot at that poor ganger that's located on the rubble pile. And not only did he hit as well as wound Souljax, he also managed to put that ganger out of action as well. So because of that, Souljax does fly off the battlefield, and he will need to roll up on the serious injury table to see exactly what happens to him at the end of the campaign. While that is happening, of course, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, that's Moloko. My buddy Warlord Ace activates that guy and sends him to a double move directly into the MCI Chemical Works Tower. And as you can see, he makes a double move to the base of the tower, so hopefully that guy's a long climb all the way back up to the top of the tower to try to secure some loot crates. The only problem is when he does get to the top of that tower, he pretty much has an entire gang's worth of Sleeping Dogs waiting for him when he gets there, so things are not looking very good for my buddy Warlord Ace at this point. While that is occurring, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine activates Tiny, and because he's a champion, also activates Mr. Smug as well. Both the Heavy Stubber as well as the Bolt Gun start taking aim at the nearest members of 9/11 right across the battlefield from them in order to put down some suppressive fire. And using both gangers, not only do they manage to inflict a flesh wound onto Nero, they also manage to put the guy down as well. So now the guy is laying there with a serious injury as well, and he's bleeding right next to Souljax, to Tugs, right as well. So now my buddy Warlord Ace, he has 2 gang members on his left-hand flank who are down. He's got 3 guys who's gone out of action. He doesn't have very many gang members left in his gang, and things are definitely looking very good for Warlord Ace, and he realizes that he might be losing this battle report. Alright, so that takes us directly to the end phase. As you can see in this photo, the worst thing possibly happens to my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine. His gang leader, Mr. Sinister, rolls up on his injury table, and as you can see there, he rolled an out of action icon as well, so that guy does go out of action, and he'll need to roll up on the series injury table to see exactly what happens to him as well. So that being said, that ends up with turn number 2. We go directly to the top of turn number 3. But as you can see, we never really get there because at this point, my buddy, not for my buddy Warlord Ace for his 911 gang, he pretty much balls it out and calls it at this point because he doesn't want to lose any more gangers than he already has and doesn't want more guys rolling up on the series injury table than he already has at this point as well. Pretty short battle report on this one because of all the losses that 9/11 was taking the opening turns of this battle report. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go directly to the post game because this battle report is now officially over. Alright, so now it's time for the post game. This talks about exactly what happens to the fate for each of the gangs. We're going to first start off with 9/11 of House Van Saar. As you can see, for injuries, my buddy Warlord Ace had 5 members of his gang had to roll up on the injury table. That was Chopper, Nero, Tugs, Souljax, as well as F&G. Chopper, the champion armed with the heavy stubber, managed to get a grievous injury on this part, so because of that, he will have to miss out on his next battle report. Same thing with Souljax as well. He received a grievous injury, so he will also have to lose a turn while he goes on recovery. 2 of his gang members, Nero and F&G, rolled out cold, so because of that, both those guys make a full recovery and they'll be back in it again. However, the worst case scenario is my buddy Warlord Ace's ganger Tugs. That guy rolled enfeebled, so because he has -1 to his toughness for the rest of the campaign, and he will also have to go on recovery for him missing out another battle report as well. As for advancements, my buddy Warlord Ace decides not to spend any of his experience points for advancements at this time, so because of that, there are no advancements. For reputation, in the end, he did manage to gain 1 point of reputation for fighting against the sleeping dogs for the very first time, but he also loses 2 reputation for not getting a single loot counter, and he also loses a reputation point for bottling out as well. So in the end, 9/11 ends up with a total reputation of 1, so things are very, very bad for House Van Saar at this campaign so far. In the end, their turf is still located at 2 hexes. In their income, they managed to work their turf, earning 50 creds, but they place all 50 of those creds directly into the stash to keep them for a rainy day later on. Their current record now is at 1 win as well as 1 loss, and their current gang rating is at 1,130 points. Things are not looking very good right now for 9/11. Alright, so let's go and talk about the sleeping dogs real quick of House Delaque. In the end, there's only gang only suffered 1 injury, and that was Mr. Sinister, the leader. Luckily for my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine, he rolled an out cold result, so because of that, Mr. Sinister makes a full recovery, and he'll be able to participate in the next battle report. Just like my buddy Warlord Ace, he did not spend any of his experience points to advance any of his ganger at this time, so because of that, there are no advancements. However, when it came to the reputation, they did gain 1 reputation for fighting against 9/11 for the first time, and they also gained 2 points reputation for not losing any loot counters. However, because the gang also decided to bottle out, their total reputation now is at 5 points, which is actually pretty good for them at this point. Their turf size is still at 1 hex. They didn't gain any new hexes, and they managed to work 60 creds out of their territory, but instead of spending any of it, my buddy Sergeant Sigmarine decided to put it all in the stash as well. This gang's current record is at 2 wins as well as 0 losses, and their current gang rating is at 1,160 points. That's going to do it for this one, ladies and gentlemen. As always, please feel free to comment, like, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is invaluable as always. Also, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Google+, as well as Blogger for all the latest and greatest what we're doing for a hobby. That's going to do it for this one, you guys. You guys stay classy. We will catch you on the next one. Peace out.